Hello, friends. If you love stories that send chills down your spine, if you're fascinated by how one battle, one decision, one steel machine can bend the course of history, you've come to the exact right place. Don't switch away. This story is not just dry facts from a textbook. This is a drama of human courage, fatal mistakes, metal, and blood. The story of how, near a lake with an almost resort-like name, Balaton, a real hell unfolded, and how in that hell Soviet self-propelled guns put a decisive, final full stop to the history of the legendary German tankmen. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and most importantly, write in the comments which other turning points of the war you want me to tell you about. Your opinion and interest are the fuel for new stories. And now brace yourselves, we're diving in. Balaton Hell. How the hundreds put a cross on the Panzerwaffe. My view of the Third Reich's last blitzkrieg. When I first delved deeply into the history of the Balaton operation, one thought struck me hard. We often look at the spring of 1945 as a time of the Red Army's unconditional triumph. Berlin is already almost in sight. Everything seems clear. The enemy is running. But imagine the feelings of a German soldier, an SS man from the elite 6th Panzer Army. This was not some exhausted, snarling beast. This was still a fanged, furious predator gathered into one last desperate fist. They were told, "We will smash the Russians like in 41. We will take Hungary back. We will change everything." And they believed it, because in their menagerie, there were monstrous Royal Tigers, fast Panthers, and the most experienced crews who had been through fire and water. This was Hitler's last hope, his last major gamble. And it burst with such a crash that the whole of history heard it. Why? Let's figure it out together, step by step. Context: all in on the edge of the abyss. To understand the scale of madness and desperation of Operation Spring Awakening, Frühlingserwachen in German, we need to rewind a little. January 1945. Soviet troops are already in Poland, already preparing the crushing Vistula strike. The Eastern Front is cracking at the seams. Yet Hitler's gaze is fixed on the south, on Hungary. Why? Everything came together here: economics, obsession, strategic insanity. Hungary was the Reich's last serious ally. Losing it meant losing the last human reserves, Hungarian divisions, and, crucially, the last oil fields around Nagykanizsa. Without Hungarian oil, the already dying German war machine would have stopped completely within a couple of months. This was a question of survival in the most literal, technical sense. On top of that, Hitler was possessed by a completely delusional idea. Deliver a crushing blow in the south, throw the Russians back beyond the Danube, and this would supposedly change the entire political picture. It would allegedly show the Western Allies Germany's remaining strength and make them consider a separate peace against the USSR. It was a casino roulette with the very last chips on one single number. The stake was the elite 6th SS Panzer Army under Sepp Dietrich. This army had just failed in the Ardennes in the west but was quickly transferred east. Its backbone was the cream of the SS divisions. Leibstandard, Das Reich, Totenkopf, Viking, truly the flower of the Panzerwaffe. They were given the best that remained. Heavy Tiger II battalions, those same Royal Tigers with almost impenetrable frontal armor, Panthers, assault guns. On the Soviet side, Marshal Talbotkin's Third Ukrainian Front. The troops had just finished the brutal battle for Budapest. The armies were exhausted. Reinforcements often came from recently liberated areas with minimal training. It looked like ideal conditions for a German attack. But here begins the first fatal mistake, the first crack in the German plan that would become an abyss. Fatal mistake number 1, the illusion of surprise and spring mud season. Obsessed with secrecy, the German command did something unimaginable. To preserve surprise, they forbade reconnaissance of the future offensive area. They struck almost blind. And it was spring, March. In Hungary, picture this: hundreds of steel monsters, Tigers and Panthers, each weighing 50 to 70 tons, start moving not on frozen ground as command had planned, but on thawed, soaked Hungarian mud. It wasn't soil anymore, it was swamp, mush. The mightiest machines, the pride of German engineering genius, simply sank. They got stuck up to their axles, up to their turrets. From archival data, we know that in the very first hours and days alone, 132 combat vehicles, including 15 Royal Tigers, became hopelessly bogged down and turned into stationary targets. Not from enemy fire, from ordinary spring Rasputitsa. Imagine the crew's feelings. They were riding into battle to crush the enemy, and instead their invincible tiger sits in a puddle like a helpless turtle. This immediately broke the entire blitzkrieg plan. Instead of a broad front, the tanks were forced to bunch up on the few roads that could still bear their weight. And on those roads, they were already waiting. Talbot's invisible fist and the birth of a legend, the SU-100. This is where I personally salute the Soviet command. Marshal Talbot and his staff were not flashy geniuses like Zhukov, but brilliant, calculating, ice-cold professionals. Intelligence, including ours, worked perfectly. They knew about the coming offensive well in advance. And they didn't just know, they prepared. Instead of meeting the blow head-on at the first line, they built a deeply echeloned defense with several lines, entire anti-tank strongholds, artillery ambushes, minefields. And the main surprise, the SU-100 self-propelled guns. Let me tell you about the SU-100 as just a regular guy who's crazy about military hardware. This wasn't simply a tank without a turret. It was arguably the best dedicated tank destroyer of the war's final period. Imagine, on the reliable, battle-proven T-34-85 chassis sits a long-barrel 100mm D-10S gun. That gun was a monster. From 1.5 to 2 kilometers, it could penetrate the frontal armor of a Panther or hit the weak spots of a Royal Tiger. It also had an excellent high-explosive shell for infantry and fortifications. But the key was how it was used. SU-100s were not thrown into head-on attacks. They were hunters. They were carefully camouflaged on the flanks of expected German routes, in ambush zones. Crew of 4. Commander, gunner, loader, driver. Cramped but a deadly team. I've read veterans' memoirs. They said the worst part was the waiting. You sit in ambush. Everything is silent. You only hear water dripping in the trench. Then, on the horizon, the ground itself starts moving. It's not the ground. It's dozens of steel beasts clanking their tracks, crawling along the road. Your heart pounds like crazy. You wait until they come into optimal range, until they expose their side. The commander shouts, "Lead tank, armor-piercing, fire!" And out of the silence comes thunder, a shot, and the first torch flares up in the enemy column. One unit that particularly distinguished itself was the 208th Separate Self-Propelled Artillery Brigade. They had 63 SU-100s. They literally mowed down German formations. The 100 did have one well-documented design flaw: no machine gun for close defense. Imagine, you knock out several tanks, but German infantry with Panzerwaffe breaks through to you, and you have nothing to shoot back with. They had to hastily mount captured or Soviet light machine guns right in the field. That's how solutions were born in battle. Hell on earth, Service, Kalas, Simontornia. Despite the mud and losses, the Germans pushed forward with fanatical stubbornness. And here unfolded episodes of such intensity that your head spins. Take the battle at Kalas near the Service Canal. There stood our 43rd Anti-Tank Artillery Brigade guys with 45mm guns and ZIS-3s against the elite of the Leibstandard on Tigers. The outcome seemed predetermined. But no, the gunners stood to the death. They fired from open positions at point-blank range, setting tanks ablaze while being crushed under tracks themselves. Almost all of them died. They lost 32 guns. But at the cost of that sacrifice, they knocked out 44 German tanks. They broke the back of the attack on that sector. That wasn't tactics anymore. That was pure supreme self-sacrifice. Heroism in its purest form. Or take Simontornia and Sarbagard. There the SS men, literally carpeting the approaches with their dead, managed to cross the canals and seize tiny bridgeheads. But every step forward cost them rivers of blood. Soviet command reacted flexibly. As soon as a threat appeared, mobile reserves were immediately thrown in: a tank corps, a mechanized corps, even cavalry. Counterattack followed counterattack. And the density of our artillery, mind-blowing numbers, up to 160-170 guns per kilometer of front. A wall of fire. From the sky, the Il-2 Sturmovix, the flying tanks, smashed them. The climax came on the 11th of March. The Germans finally managed to break through the defenses of our rifle units, those same poorly trained fresh reinforcements. And what happened? The SU-100s, left without infantry cover, did not retreat. They accepted battle in almost hopeless conditions. One SU-100 regiment was virtually wiped out. But before that, its crews claimed 38 German tanks. They burned inside their machines but did not withdraw, delaying the enemy at the cost of their lives. That is what this war was about. Not only generals and operations, but ordinary guys in steel boxes who made the choice to stand to the end. Finale of the adventure, the Red Army's counter-blitzkrieg. Even by the 13th of March, when the SS managed to wedge in some places, it was clear the offensive had run out of breath. All reserves, including the very last fresh Panthers, had been thrown in. It was like pouring water into a bucket with no bottom. The pace of advance fell to zero. And on the 16th of March came exactly what German command feared most. After a crushing hurricane of artillery and airstrikes, fresh forces of the Third Ukrainian Front, the 4th and 9th Guards armies, went on the offensive. The blow did not hit the exhausted German grouping head-on, but struck its flank. A classic, beautiful, devastating maneuver. A direct threat of encirclement appeared for the entire 6th SS Panzer Army that had deeply penetrated our defenses. Panic, chaos, retreat order. Retreat through the same soaked mud, under constant air and flank attacks. It was no longer a withdrawal, it was flight. Operation Spring Awakening ended in complete, total failure. Results and analysis. Why this was the death sentence for the Panzerwaffe. Let's look at the numbers. They are staggering. German losses, 40,000 men, around 1,000 tanks, assault guns and armored vehicles, 200 aircraft. But it's not just the numbers, it's the quality. These were the last cadre experienced crews. This was the last large mass of the newest equipment. After Balaton, German panzer troops ceased to exist as a high-quality strategic force. They could still defend, still snap, but launch major offensives, never again. Now look at the economy and industry. This is my deep personal conviction. Balaton buried not only the elite divisions, but Germany's very ability to continue the war. March 1945, German industry, shattered by bombing, suffering colossal raw material shortages, including oil shortages, produced a pathetic 46 Panthers and Jagd Panthers. In February, it had been 168. In April, only 20. Do you understand? They couldn't even replace the losses of this one battle. The assembly lines stopped. Steel, fuel, manpower, everything was gone. Hitler's hopes for a miracle, for a separate peace, crumbled to dust together with the abandoned, immobile Royal Tigers near Székesfehérvár. And the Red Army, having repulsed this attack, exactly 1 week later launched the Vienna offensive operation. The road to Austria and southern Germany lay open. Balaton was not just a victory, it became a symbol that no technical superiority, and the Germans still had it in heavy tanks, can save you from incompetent planning, from ignoring reality, from the fighting spirit and skillful defense on the other side. That's the story. A story of mud, steel, blood, and will. Of how the last lunge of the Panzerwaffe drowned in Hungarian Rasputitsa and in the courage of Soviet soldiers and officers. For me, Balaton is one of the most powerful lessons in history. A lesson about the price of reckless gambles, about the importance of reconnaissance, about the strength of spirit that ultimately proves stronger than the thickest armor. Friends, if this story gripped you, if you felt that hell and that tension, please write in the comments. Tell me which moments struck you the most. Maybe the fate of the gunners at Kalas? Or the hunter tactics of the SU-100 crews? Or the sheer madness of the whole operation? Your opinion means the world to me. It helps make the next stories even better, even deeper. Be sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss new episodes. There are still so many incredible, dramatic, little-known pages of history ahead of us. Together we'll pick them apart to remember and to understand. Thank you for staying with me to the end. Write in the comments, let's discuss.